everyone's going to be jumping in pretty quickly because we're going to get this show on the road very shortly. I'm just going to say it once now, and I'm going to say it again in a couple of minutes. But as far as I'm concerned, if you've registered for this presentation, then your cameras are on. You're here, but you're actually physically here, so I can see you rather than having this one-way conversation. This is very much a two-way, and I expect that everyone actually shows up physically and turns their camera on. So I would love to know where in the world you guys are coming from. There's a lot of people coming on this call from all around the globe. There's some amazing different corners of the world that we're working within under the ISTO banner. So I'd love for you to use the chat while we're waiting for a couple more people to join us as to where you're coming in from today. I'm very mindful that I'm at 6 a.m. in Sydney, and it's late at night some places in the world. It's middle of the day at some places. It's crazy early at some places. So very, very grateful for the time that we're going to spend together over the next maybe hour, a bit more than an hour together. So I'm just going to open up my chat. I've only seen one person so far. No one. Where are you guys coming in from today? I appreciate all those cameras coming on. That is very much appreciated. I don't know about you, but I often turn up to presentations where I'm driving my car or I'm a bit distracted, and it's something where I know that I want to sign up, I want to get that wisdom, but I'm not actually physically present. So showing up and being part of this in a way where you are genuinely here, that's what this is all about. All right. So, Mark, you're dialing in from San Francisco. All right, brilliant. Born in Panama, half Brazilian. This guy is a citizen of the world, and he's also a good human, no, a great human. So, you might get to know Mark a little bit more at the ISTO conference because he's going to have a fireside chat around well-being. The Netherlands. All right. Waves for Women. Sarah, whereabouts in the world are you right now? So, Folly Beach, South Carolina. Love
Valley
that.
Beach. Yep.
Oh yeah, love that, Sarah. And by all means, please do, like Sarah just did, take yourself off mute today. This is not just me speaking at you guys for the next while. This is very much a dialogue between all of us. We've got someone from Oleron Island, France. Love that. Japan, yes. Oh, there's some great, awesome.
Sure.
Yes. Yes, a hero. You're a legend. Valentina, oh, lovely to see you. So there you go, guys. We've got some world citizens here today, and we're going to dive straight into it. As we know, we're here talking about this concept of the ripple effect and burnout. We're going to get into what that means and what that's all about. But before we do, we'll hear from Chris for a quick sec.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And thank you so much for being here. I'm not going to take up any time here other than introducing the legend, the wonderful. If you don't know, Joel Pilgrim, mental health innovator and dedicated to practical well-being, to say the very least. And I think what's brilliant about Joel is his work is built on some powerful foundations. He's co-founder of Ways of Wellness, helped grow a local charity supporting thousands of people regionally, and co-founder of ISTO, which is beautiful because he continues to support the sector on a global scale. Thank you so much, Joel, for that. Lastly, through his company, we're very lucky to have him today, not just as a board member, but as co-founder, but through his company, Flip Wellbeing, he now partners with organizations to tackle one of the sector's biggest challenges. We're here to talk about it today. His approach is uniquely shaped by his experience as an occupational therapist, as a non-executive director, and for those who don't know, you should know he's a big wave surfer, and I mean big, big, big waves. Check him out on social media. Joel, thanks for being here, and everybody else. And I'm out. Thanks, Joel.
Love that. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the good vibes. And you're gonna, well, whether it's fortunately or unfortunately, we're all surfing fans here. We're all in the world of surf therapy, but you're gonna see a lot of surfing in today's presentation. Now, that's because I'm a passionate surfer, but that actually makes up a big part of my own well-being. So stay tuned. You'll see a bit more. So as we dive into things today, like I said, I'd love for you to be involved. We're going to use the chat. We're going to be super interactive, and the more you give, the more you're going to get out of this session. If we check the surf when we turn up to the beach, we actually are looking for a lot of things. We're trying to work out where we're going to surf, what the conditions are like, and whether it's safe, let alone whether it's pumping. Now, this is 6 foot and offshore, but if it's not necessarily pumping in a metaphorical sense, what's the surf check like for you today? I'd love for you to jump in and first use the chat if you didn't tell me where you're from. What is it like if you check the surf in your own body right now? What is the one word that comes up for you as you're doing that scan, just like you do when you're at the beach checking the surf. If I'm talking about what that looks like for me in my own body today, I would tell you that I'm exhausted. That's probably my one word. I'm exhausted. And hopefully you can't tell that I'm exhausted because I've woken up early enough to wake myself up. But that's where I'm at. And I'd love for you guys to show up in an authentic way where you're real with one another. Grateful, seeing that gratitude, struggling in the whitewash. Oh, I love that analogy. Metaphors of the ocean, they're going to be strong today. Well played. So, no matter where you are and what you're feeling right now, I hope that this is a space where we can actually be real with one another. I'm going to share things with you today that are a little bit more personal, that are very close to home, that might actually be a little bit triggering. And if that's the case, we can absolutely chat about it. If you need to take some time and step away from your computer, pop yourself off camera for a little while, totally cool. But I'd love for you to come and re engage and be involved in this group and this community as much as possible. Pushing through to get to the lineup. Yeah, another brilliant metaphor. Whether that's relentless sets that are rolling in and you're just trying to get out the back end of the lineup. Yeah, I feel you. I absolutely feel you. Now, whether you have lived experience of burnout yourself or whether you're someone who's passionate about this area and hoping that you don't get to that, I hope that you can learn from my story and my example, just one example of many within our community of how you might be able to avoid making some of the same mistakes that I did. So, if we think further around what that surf check looks like for today's time together, we're going to be talking a little bit about my story, that N equals 1 case study. We're also going to be working around what that concept of mental fitness is and building personal sustainability. Like, this is a really important concept in all jobs, but in our work, even more so. And we're going to talk about sort of concepts as a whole, but we're also going to talk about what that actually means specifically for us in this sector of surf therapy. You might be joining us from wider sectors that are in the for-purpose sector, but whatever we're talking about here is all relevant to supporting people and making sure you are there for the long haul. That self-leadership is really what we're talking about. That idea of being able to master your own well-being and your own efficacy so that you can show up continuously for the people that we are serving. You're also going to see a couple of these examples around lessons and takeaways from my own experience as leadership and big wave surfing comes to life. If you've got any questions, please do pop them into the chat as we go. Chris will be watching the chat and she'll be able to draw those questions out at the end when we have question time. My goal is we have a lot of time to talk through and to have these conversations together. If you're watching this back after the fact and you've got this link because you've signed up and you're a member of ISTO, I would encourage you guys to reach out to me with any questions that you've got. This doesn't have to just be a conversation for this time. It can keep going. So do keep an eye out for these takeaways. No, we're getting snaps all around. If you see people on the call doing this and you don't know what it is, it's because when someone is talking, generally you want to give them good vibes, but you don't want to clap and make them, drown them out. So more of physical context, but a lot of snaps, a lot of quacks, and there's also the emotions on the screen. I would love for you guys to use as much emotions as possible. When I see those little emotions come up, it makes me understand exactly where you guys are at. So it's brilliant. Oh, Shaka's even go Rockets. Love hearts. Love that. Love that. So my career has gone in a very interesting and wonderful journey. Years ago, I worked in high secure forensic mental health hospitals. More recent times, I've worked in sort of psychiatric intensive care units where people are very unwell at the pointy end of the spectrum. I've spent time bottom left on Tabletop Mountain in South Africa running a wellbeing retreat. I've done immersive leadership retreats for executives on board super yachts in Fiji. Like there's so many weird and wild things that I've done, but all of these things are bringing me to this conversation today with a lot of information to share. And I hope that you guys get a lot out of that. As an occupational therapist, I had an opportunity to either move into the mental health or the physical health. For me, I was very passionate about mental health. I've got lived experience myself as a young kid, really struggling with this concept of being incredibly badly bullied. And for me, it got to the point where, trigger alert, I was actually having thoughts of suicide as a 13-year-old kid. Now, framing this up is really important to note that why I'm so passionate about this world. But for me, I was always setting out to try and support just one person, getting one person away from that experience that I had to endure. Now, as an occupational therapist, I moved into this world of New South Wales Health. I worked as a early psychosis OT. My role was actually to get people back on the train tracks of life after they were having their first episode of psychosis. This is age 14 to 24, people that were very unwell, and I met some amazing people along the way. One of those people was Julio. Now, Julio is a young guy, he was 24 at the time, and his goal was to get back to surfing. He'd been a surfer years before, but he'd actually put on 25 kilograms due to clozapine. It's an antipsychotic medication that actually balloons you in 3 months. So for me, I wanted to support this guy, but I wanted to make sure that I did it in a way that he wanted to do, not I expected him to do. So we had the most incredible opportunity where I actually grabbed surfboards from my garage, took him surfing, and we had 30 minutes out there in the ocean. Now, in that time, I could have had my head on the absolute chopping block, but what happened was nothing short of incredible. It was like this light switch turned on, and it really inspired me to go on the next 10 years of my life to now. So, this program that I designed up, I presented to New South Wales Health. I said to them, this is a program which I really believe is going to work. And they said three things: too much risk, too much red tape, and it's never going to work. Oh, they also said, you're just a surfer who wants to get paid to go surfing for a living. Now, they weren't wrong about that, but there was so much more to it, and they just didn't understand what I had seen. Now, Julio was someone who was such an incredible guy, but that one case study was something that I knew needed to happen. I worked so hard to make this happen within the system, and I couldn't. It almost broke me, and that was the first time that I got really close to burnout. Now, what I actually did was I knew that I needed to make this work. I made the biggest sacrifice ever, and I quit my job as a therapist in a really secure role for New South Wales government and started doing TV extra work. Now, I was trying to jam in as much jobs as possible to make as much money as I could in a short amount of time to then come back and do the work that I was doing on my computer and building and creating this sort of idea of surf therapy. To the point where I was actually an extra on a Rexona commercial where I lifted Sally Fitzgibbon up on my shoulders. I was at a bar on this TV show drinking beer, over and over after take and take, and then I realized that it was actually non-alcoholic beer back then. Uh, and then I was even getting opportunities like holding a whopper for a TV commercial. Now, a funny story that not many people know here is that I have a twin brother. A few of you are aware of that. But in this example, I was not available because I had to go to something else. So I sent my twin brother to go and do this shoot, and no one knew that it was him. They just thought it was me, and I took a 20% cut. It was perfect. So why I'm sharing this with you is that we have to figure out ways to make this work, and I just figured it out. But it didn't come without its cost. That cost also had benefit though. This idea of driving an Uber was something which was pretty lucrative at the time back then, and I actually jumped into Uber driving to fit it around the work that I was doing. It actually at the same time became the turning point where Julio was then the poster child of what was possible if we actually tried things outside of the box. Now, my message to you guys here is, around burnout is, yeah, you might be working your ass off to create something, but in the event that it works, you just have to hang in there. You have to know that there is always another way. Now, for someone like Julio and for that idea of, building a program, there was another way in that it didn't have to work within the hospital. I designed it up and we're able to do it in the sort of non-government sector. But what we're really talking about here is having the resilience to push through and overcome those challenges. And the last bit there, emerge stronger and wiser. Now, burnout is when that doesn't actually come to life, when resilience isn't able to be fostered as easily. Now, keep in mind that Uber story. I actually found that it was a beautiful way to meet people. And I met someone who was the most incredible man. And I made $20,000 in one Uber trip. And that became the seed funding of Waves of Wellness Foundation. Now, what that really meant was that every person I met had the opportunity to change things. And for me, I want to make sure that's really clear to you guys that literally every person you meet, you have to treat them like they can literally change your life. If you're burnt out, if you're struggling with resilience, if your mental health is actually lower and you're not fostering that well-being, then you're not going to be able to do this. Now, Waves of Wellness Foundation, for those of you who don't know, it's been around for 9 years. And during that time, we've put through around 5,000 people in our programs. It's an 8-week therapy program. We've got trained mental health clinicians who are often the learn to surf instructors as well. So there's a little bit of context, but the research that we've done over the years has demonstrated that people are getting a lot out of that therapeutic practice on the beach that's actually simulating the hospital environment, but it's done in such a laid back way that we call it health by stealth. Now, we've worked with people in many different ways, but what we do know is that getting out of that hospital environment and changing the environment does change people's mindsets. And whether that is our constituents or participants that we serve, or whether that is you guys as practitioners and health professionals and surf therapy experts, we know that we need to change our environment to really shift things. And if nothing else, this is what I do in my own personal life to shift that energy and to practice well-being. Now, we meet people all over the world in the work that we do that can be quite triggering, that can be a lot. This is heavy work at times. This is Dave. He's a police officer of 13 years who was actually medically discharged. And he said that the program actually had saved his life. We found him at just the right time. This is Jen, and she was a 13-year-old kid when we met her. And she actually found out that her mum died by suicide, and she was self-harming at the time. So she realized, oh my God, I need to not do this because that could be me, was her words. These are just, a couple of stories that are really making it very crystal clear that the work we do isn't just smooth sailing. It can be challenging at times. There was actually a shark attack in a beach on the New South Wales North Coast, and this community reached out to us at Waves of Wellness and wanted us to create a program to grieve the loss of their 16-year-old friend. So we created a program within a month, and then we're up there delivering it on the beach. In another example, there were fires in Australia back in 2020. They called it the worst fires ever. And these people were on the beach thinking that they were going to die. The fire was coming to the shore and they had to basically get in the water. Now, that is incredibly traumatizing for a lot of people, but the community reached out to us at Waves of Wellness and we started to become a bit of a trauma response program. We actually, within 3 weeks, had 8 therapists on the beach, took 72 surfboards from the local area and donated it to that major surfing community that had all of their belongings, including surfboards, decimated. That bottom right photo is a month after the fires, and the fire is still burning in the background. LA fires, all around the world, there's different things that have happened that really demonstrate this. But why I share this just very briefly is that the people that we're working with and the work that we do can be very heavy. And that is why this conversation we're having today is very, very important, that we need to foster mental health and wellbeing. We even have a program at the Urban Surf Wave Pool in Sydney. That's where we operate. We have a partnership with these guys. And recently, well, not so recently, this was last year, there was a guy that died in the water. Now, the CPR process that happened after was incredibly traumatizing for the 24 staff involved in his attempt at resuscitation. And we were actually brought in to help process that loss and trauma. This was one of the hardest things that I did in my time at Waves of Wellness as a practitioner. But what we often refer to at Waves of Wellness is this idea of the duck analogy. On the surface, it looks like us as practitioners, we're doing great, we're doing fine, and we're doing as much as we can, and we're just calm about it. But really under the water, we are kicking like hell to stay upstream. And that idea, I've even got my duck here. This sits on my desk all the time. This is my surfing duck. That analogy of kicking under the water, we can't see what's happening under the water, is really, really strong in the work of us as surf therapy practitioners. We might be trying to fit in as much as possible. We might be trying to please everyone, but it is so important to acknowledge that we cannot see what's under the surface. We cannot see our colleagues. We cannot see our peers in the sector, and everyone just thinks we're doing fine. This Ducktober metaphor is something that we've grown into the month of October at Waves of Wellness. And actually, it's coming up as of today in Australia. It's the 1st of October. So this is a challenge which we're doing cold water immersion every day of the month. Now, this is completely unrelated to this call, but that duck analogy is something that people really understand and know now because of we've been doing this for 7 years. Now, no matter where you are in the world, no matter how you come into the ISTO family, this is the conversation that we need to be having. Like, how can we look under the surface? How can we work out how people are traveling if we can't see it? Now, I don't know where you guys are, but this is a very old map, but I love this one because it shows just how diverse this community is. And with 140 organizations around the world being members of ISTO, I love this stuff because we're not just talking about individual case studies like we've just heard. We're talking about everyone with collective experience that has a lot to learn and a lot to give in this sort of family of ISTO. Now, with about, I sort of estimated that there's over 70 people registered for this call, so there's going to be a lot of people looking back and checking this out. But this is roughly estimating 40 people. So if there's 40 people in this community, this environment right now that we're talking to, this is actually how many people are struggling. 2 in 5. 40%, that's 16 people out of 40 that are actively struggling with mental health challenges. Now, burnout is a part of that, but mental health challenges in and of itself are something that we need to be on top of and we need to ensure that we're addressing. Now, this idea of the ripple effect, the title of today's presentation, is something which is particularly close to home for me. It's actually a part of the WOW logo. So that ripple in the WOW logo is all about being able to spread those good vibes and resonate them throughout the community. But it doesn't matter whether you have a really positive practice, you're rippling that out. You're going to send really good vibes amongst all the community you're working with. It doesn't matter whether you're actually struggling a little bit, you might be a little bit frustrated or resentful, that's actually going to ripple out too. And if you're really struggling and you're really unwell, or you might be thinking, fuck this, I'm so over it, I can't do this anymore, that's where I was, then those ripples are also going out through your community. It's not just our participants, it's our peers, it's our colleagues, it's our family. It's so many people that are impacted by whatever ripple that you're putting out there. So my first sort of, my ask of you is, what ripple are you actually putting out there? What are you communicating with the world, and how is that being received? For those of you who are just joining us, please put your cameras on because I love to see you and be a part of this conversation. A while ago, I actually had a really profound moment, and this is something which I hope you guys can take away from my journey. I had a previous wife and a now ex-wife, and things were very challenging at the time. I was trying to please everyone. We were doing so much with so limited resources that she said to me years ago, she said to me this: they get the best of you while I get the rest of you. That hit me like a dagger. And she was so right. I was so depleted when I rocked up home that I was a shell of a human, and I was a terrible partner, a terrible husband, and quite frankly, a terrible friend to everyone around me. And that space of burnout for me was something where I had my blinkers on and I couldn't even see it until that hit me in the face. So I want you guys to take from this whatever you will. I want you to realize that you're not just impacting yourself, you're impacting everyone around you. And that's why, as practitioners, and that's why, as the surf therapy world, we have to be on top of this stuff. If we look at that idea of burnout, it's simply that emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that we're talking about here. For me, that was very, very apparent. But it's not just having those things present, it's prolonged exposure to those events of stress. Now, whatever that looks like in your world, for me, that was more around this concept of feeling resentment, of feeling compassion fatigue, of feeling that this was not a space that I wanted to be in, yet I couldn't escape and get myself out of it. Those different areas, the 3 dimensions down the bottom of the screen, are actually a really big part of this. Is it exhaustion that you guys are feeling? Is it cynicism, or are you actually, becoming a little bit depersonalized from the work that you're doing? All the dot points below are actually describing different examples of this, but for me, the reduced professional efficacy is probably the biggest one here. If you're feeling ineffective or unproductive, or you're actually thinking, I don't actually care about this impact anymore, that's not normal. That's not a part of this job. It can be, because it so often happens where we're exposed to so much and have limited resources to deal with it. But this is what we want to try and avoid. If we look about like the specifics of surf therapy, what I think is particularly important here to note is that the emotional labor, we've talked about that a lot, what we're exposed to is quite significant in this world. But also this intensity of the physical activity of surfing while out there in the natural environment, exposed to the elements, and then having to get home and figure out all the rest of the stuff. For me, I didn't have support for years and years, and I know that many organizations around the world, we struggle with the resources to even pay for what we're doing. And that's why getting the right processes and practices in place can be really, really effective. Now, I'd love to hear from you guys for a second. Like, when you jump into the chat and you answer this question. What is it that you actually notice when things start to unravel, when things aren't going so well, when you don't prioritize your well-being? What is it that you start to notice? You've seen a lot of examples from me. So dive into the chat right now. What are you seeing in your own well-being when you don't prioritize it? There's many things out there that can be possible here, but one of the first things that come up for me is that I get really agitated really quickly. I like to pride myself on being quite a compassionate, supportive person. With that therapy background, I know how important that is. But often I can get to this point of, you know what, like I just flick of a switch and you react. And I don't love that. Let's see what you guys are saying. Pushing very negative self-talk. Yeah, absolutely. Come on, don't all jump in at once, guys. Get off your hands and use that keyboard. So that idea of lack of productivity, Hannah. Yeah, so the negative self-talk can be a big one. There you go. Distracted, being not present, impatience, craving sugar, diet. That's a big one. Yeah. So no matter what that looks like, irritability, yeah, there's so many examples of what can start to manifest if we're not looking out for our well-being. In fact, there's a ton of stuff, and don't get overwhelmed by this slide. It's just to demonstrate that I hear a lot of responses when I ask this question around many different audiences. But the last one there, burnout, is where things can really lead to if we don't address this. Now, you might have seen the World Health Organization doesn't classify this as a mental illness. They classify it as a workplace phenomenon. Now, it's a different framing, but it's not necessarily a mental health challenge, but it can definitely lead to it. Exhausted but can't sleep, physically being sick, of hosting day of surf therapy. Oh, 100%. I feel that. There's a lot of love coming to the emotions on the chat too, so well played. So there's this idea of the rip analogy. We've heard those metaphors. Chris, you did a great job of dropping them straight in within the first 30 seconds of this call. The metaphors of the ocean. Here is a big one. If we're in the rip of the ocean, we know what rips are as surfers, most of us do. But it's the current that goes across the shore and sucks out to sea. And when people are stuck in it, they've got a number of options. Here's the options that they've got. They can choose to swim against it, use a lot of energy, and potentially not get out of that rip. That might be in surf therapy terms, just doing the same old thing and expecting a different result. We don't have the resources, but we're just going to push hard. We're going to do hard, work harder. The other option is they can swim to the side. And that will use less energy, but still not using a lot of skills and strategies. If you're not catching on, this is a great metaphor for our well-being. And when we're thinking about how to manage things and when leading to burnout, this is really important. You can let go and just go with it. And eventually you will get back to the shore. You'll save the most amount of energy, but you'll eventually wash back onto the beach. The fourth one is actually putting your hand up and asking for help. We are telling that to our constituents, our participants all the time. But how often are you actually putting your own hand up for help? If you're anything like me, I was not doing that. I had my own sort of stigmas around it, and that's so counterintuitive working in this space. But that's the world that we play in, right? We know that idea of to be rescued, you need to put your hand up. But why don't we actually feel okay to do that normally? What is it that we need to do to build our mental fitness? I don't care what it is that you guys do. There's so many things out there that we can do to make sure that we're fostering mental fitness. There is a very clear understanding of what physical health is for our well-being. Going to the gym, creating resistance, creating pain for our muscles and growth. But what about the metaphorical muscle? What about that child that runs to school with a broken arm and waves their cast in the air and everyone wants to sign their cast? How do we then translate that to an invisible issue, a metaphorical cast? There's many ways that you guys can foster well-being, and I don't need to teach you to suck eggs here. But for me, it's surfing, big wave surfing actually, because that's a place where I just reset and I actually can get out there and experience that stillness, that flow state that I don't often get from surfing normally. I often will just completely wipe my day schedule if I see a swell coming. And my team used to know at Waves Wellness, if it's a big wave day, we don't see Joel. And that was a boundary, or that was a sort of a thing I put in place so that I knew that I got what I needed when it came to serving my own well-being, my own self-care. Now, that might not be your idea of self-care. That might be the worst idea ever, but as weird as it sounds, like this is my happy place. Don't judge, please. So, like I said, I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs. There's a lot of things that you can do to foster your own well-being. If you want, take a photo of this screen, take a screenshot of your screen, whatever you need to do. But these are the most 50 common things that I hear when asking that question. Now, whether you see something that you're like, oh, I've not thought about that one, or I haven't done that in a while, maybe this can be your little reminder to try this out. Maybe choose one thing from each of these 5 lists and do it over the next 5 weeks. You know, this is something which we need to foster more often and do it more regularly. So I want you guys to jump back in the chat, and I want to make sure that we're able to use this opportunity, this time together, to learn from one another. This is not just me speaking at you. This is me having a conversation with peers. I know that I'm not the only person here that's had significant experiences of burnout. And I also know that I'm not the only person here who has amazing clinical experience. And you guys, I want to be able to learn from one another today. So, this question I'd love for you to answer in the chat. What is one thing, one practice that you've actually done that's helped you sustain yourself in this work of surf therapy? If you're not in the surf therapy world and you're on this call, I'd still love to hear what's that one thing that you've done that's actually allowed you to keep on driving forward in that for purpose work. So we've got asking for help, reaching out to people. You know, what's that like for you, Ben? Take yourself off mute. If you were to ask for help and within your world, how's that experience been?
Well, from my point of view, in the last 7 years, I'm doing this surf therapy work. It actually got to a point that I was about to quit the surf therapy world in 2022. And what made me decide otherwise is just tell that story and share my experiences with the other people within the ISTO family, just to find out that I wasn't dealing with that problem on my own. This is actually a thing that a lot of founders, practitioners, and other people in the surf therapy world struggle with. And just by sharing your experience and hearing from other people, just make me realize that this is an actual thing, and gave me the confidence that if we share that amongst each other, we can have each other's back, and then just push through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Very well said. You know, I will I will sit here and make it look like I had my shit together somewhat. But the most realistic thing I can share with you guys is that I was just making it up as I went along. And one of the things which became very relevant is that I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I'm getting feedback. That's very strange. Well, let's see, let's kick on. Please send me a message in the chat if things get weird, because I'm not sure what's just happened there. So for me, when I was acknowledging that something was wrong and shared it, I agree, Ben. That concept of a problem shared is a problem halved is really valuable. If things get weird, because to me, when I share, I agree, Ben. That concept of shared problem halved. Let me see if I can change this. All right. If that freaks out again, I'd love to know, because I'm not exactly sure what's happening there. So thanks for sharing that, Ben. Really valuable and really important to be able to talk about your experience. I mean, from the chat, you can see there's a lot of really cool stuff here. So actually surfing yourself, Dave, I could not agree more. Like making the time to surf outside of that sentiment of work for us. We also saw that saying no to new ideas or extra work. Preach. Yes, that is so valuable. I mean, taking on more things and trying to please everyone when things aren't necessarily honky-dory, that's really, really important. So, Jamie, I'd love to just understand a little bit more about this regular daily gratitude. So, can you share with us what that looks like for you?
Yeah, So this was something I found out about through work I was doing with Offshore, through an amazing book, if anyone wants to read it, called The Happiness Advantage, but it's just really great. It's more about corporate well-being, but it's this idea, it is a mental workout. And what you do is at the end of each day is you scan the day for three things you're grateful for. They can be big things, they can be little things, they can be anything. And the act of gratitude is a nice feeling for yourself, but what it does is over time it trains you to be a bit more optimistic around, well, it trains you to have an optimistic mindset, which, going back to what you said about resilience, it affects the way, yeah, it helps when things are going good, but it really helps when things are not going so good. So it's a way of training your brain to react a certain way. And I'll be totally honest with you, I originally didn't think much of it. It sounded a bit airy-fairy for me. But if I was going to ask other people to do it, I thought I should try it. And after about a month and a half, geez, it's one of the things I think that's had the best impact on my well-being recently. And now I do it with my wonderful wife. We do it together, and we call each other out if we don't do it. And we send them to each other. Even when we're in the same room, at the end of the day, we'll send them to each other just so we keep up that regular practice. And yeah, it's just been something that I've found really, really powerful and shifted my mindset in a really helpful way, especially when the chips are down, as it would.
Mm, mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jamie. There's science behind it too. Like your brain will change over time, and the neurons will fire in a different way. But you're also looking at this idea of, if I can be grateful in this area of my life, maybe it's going to move into another aspect. Yeah, so valuable. There's some really, really special things happening in the chat. So if you're not looking, have a look. Prioritizing your own exercise routine, absolutely. Surrounding myself with supportive people, cultivating a spiritual practice, meditation. Mark, from your point of view in meditation and what that looks like, meditation can be many different things to many different people. What's your form that's worked for you that people might be able to take away from you? We've still got you on mute. We've still got you on mute. Gotcha.
Yeah, actually, Mark's not on mute. We just can't hear him. We're not.
Huh.
Mark, do they not have sound there in San Francisco? What's going on? Just the tech capital of the world. What's going on? Can't hear you.
Maybe drop it in the chat, Mark. I'd love to hear what you've got to say there. Like,
Can you
I
guys hear me
really,
now?
yeah, gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, so what I was saying, Joel, is I don't want to steal too much thunder from my own fireside chat at ISTO, otherwise you guys won't come. But um, what it means for me, I think everything that everybody's talked about in the chat is obviously fantastic. But the first step to knowing what you need is to connect to yourself. And the only way to connect to yourself is through a deep self-inquiry. So how can you possibly know what you need if you're disconnected from yourself? And the only way to connect to yourself is through meditation. There's a reason why people have been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. And that's because it works. So, I think there are lots of different techniques that work for different types of people. Some people are very restless, and walking meditation is better for them. Other people, are fine sitting down and, having a seated meditation practice. Some people like a guided meditation practice. Some people have literally just like to meditate in silence. And there's no right answer. The right answer is whatever practice allows you to essentially turn your eyes inward and examine what's going on with you, with your body, with your mind, with your heart, with your spirit. And in order to know what you need, that's got to be the first step.
Ah, can we just finish this? Like, laptops down, we're done. Love that, Mark. Thank you for sharing. So valuable. And if that hit home for you, if that was a little like, ooh, I felt that, then there's a reason for it. If you don't feel connected to yourself, we're all guilty of that, me included, then that is such a beautiful way to put that, Mark, of coming back to ourselves and understanding ourselves. I mean, how can we expect to show up for the people that we're serving if we don't genuinely do the work ourselves? That's really, really important here. Thank you, Mark. That's really valuable. So ocean and cold water immersion in Chile from Valentina. You know, there's you're assessing your own motivation to continue with the project, Carolina. Yeah, learning to say no. Participant smiles. Oh, valuable. Drop the mic. Yeah, I agree, Sarah. You did. He just went bang. Well said. All right, so you've heard some really valuable things here, but I'd love you to maybe answer this question ongoing for yourself. Like, what has worked in the past, and what is that one thing that actually helped when things were feeling good? Yeah, so valuable. So let's talk about this idea of practical strategies to actually prevent this idea of burnout. There's four main areas, and these four main areas are very clearly depicted. But what I want you to focus on is the 4 dot points, or the 3 or 4 dot points underneath each one. You know, in particular, if you've got this idea of understanding your energy, checking in, and really understanding how you're showing up, that idea of personal energy management is so valuable. Is it that you need to set better boundaries and say no? We've seen that a bit in the chat. Well played. Is it that you need to have better self-care practices? Or is it that you need to actually get away from the work and completely disconnect so that you can freshen yourself up? Many different ways to do that. But I would like to encourage you guys to use this ISTO family as a way of providing that connection, that support, that camaraderie and sounding board, which many of us do not have in our day-to-day. Ben shared a good example earlier around coming to this community and sharing how he was traveling and then realizing, holy shit, I'm not the only person who's struggling with this. Just like Ben, there's 3 times that I can remember where I was that close to walking away from everything. Literally just closing the doors of Waves of Wellness and saying, I can't fucking do this. I'm done. And do not get to that is what my message is to you. What do you need to do to avoid getting to that? There's a powerful photo that's coming up that'll depict just that. But when we are looking at who's, you know, among us, it's often the people that we do expect the least that can be struggling the most. And that is something which I learned by sharing and realizing exactly the same way that Ben did, is that, whoa, that person looks like they've got it all together. Like, I made an assumption that wasn't true. So let's look at the practical frameworks that you guys might be able to employ to really bring this to life. I like the sort of number 2 here the most, the energy audit. We've already talked about that, but drains versus gains is what I call it. What is it in your life that's draining you? What is it that feels icky, that isn't serving you? What aspect of your work do you not enjoy? Juxtapose that versus that with the things that are really serving you, the things that you're getting energy gains from. Whatever that is, I want you to focus more on that. So if there's nothing else that you take away from this slide, there's energy drains in your life, there's energy gains in your life, and you need to understand them, and you really need to understand what that looks like in your own individual scenario. Whether it is understanding the orange or red flags and having a system to alert yourself to that, maybe it's you need accountability around you because you don't necessarily see the signs and symptoms yourself. I actually have what I call accountability buddies in my life. And those accountability buddies are people that I say, I'm giving you full control to tell me that I need to pull my head in and I need to change things up. They're people you trust, and they're people that can really support you. And that idea of having a support map can really, really support you with a support map. You get what I'm saying. Self-care is something that I believe is incredibly misunderstood. There are so many different ways that self-care can be represented. If you have a look around the screen there is so many things that you might not actually think is self-care, but it is. Putting yourself first, setting a boundary, saying no, staying at home instead of going out to that event, having a sick day. There's so many different examples, but what I often find is that self-care comes with, especially in the workplace, it comes with this sentiment of, I don't have time for that. I'm here to tell you that you can't afford not to have time for that, especially in this world that we play in. We have to make sure that we are practicing what we preach and doing this work so that we can genuinely show up for the people we serve. Now, understanding what your signs and symptoms are in self-care is really important. And there's a sort of quick story I can share with you about big wave surfing. If I'm not feeling good, if I'm feeling a little anxious or a little apprehensive, you do not ever want to put yourself in a situation like this. There's days, on this day in particular, one of my best friends was really excited for the swell and he wasn't feeling it. He had this really weird feeling and he listened to that and he did not go surfing. Now, it's around listening to your body and understanding what those signs and symptoms are so that you can actually practice genuine self-care. Missing the swallow of the year was probably the hardest thing that he did, but putting himself in situations out there which were life and death not just puts him at risk, it puts other people's lives at risk that have to go and support him. That's me in the red, almost going over the top of that wave. And I was thinking that session, I'm so glad he didn't come because I would have had to then worry about him as well. If we think about my signs and symptoms, my partner, Vanessa, my fiance, she actually tells me if I'm feeling, if to me, to her, if I'm feeling terrible and a bit moody and short-tempered, she says to me, get to the ocean because she notices the signs and symptoms before I do. That's why accountability is really important here. Now, there's a really valuable brand. You might not know exactly what I'm talking about here, but if we're thinking about this idea of being kind to yourself and taking a break, there is one brand in the world that does this so well. And I just bring these up and I share them very briefly because I love the message that these convey. You know, there's not many activations that you see that are more powerful than that. And this is my favorite one. Yeah, the guy's literally just fucked off and he's gone halfway through the job because he's genuinely practicing what he preaches. You know, this is funny. It's a great activation of what we're talking about here. But I want to make sure that you guys know what you need to do to take a break and ensure that you do not get to the last match on the screen. If you take it from me, that last match is fucking hard to come back from. Excuse my French, I'm very passionate about this stuff. But that last match, you can tell it's only a little bit more burnt than the one before it. But coming back from full burnout is very, very hard to do. Whatever you need to do, whatever you need to practice to ensure that doesn't happen to you, I want you to do it. There's this concept of getting our own help before giving it, and we know that's important, but there's a story that actually really depicts this perfectly. We need to put our oxygen mask on, but more to the point, we need to not be a superhero. In 2016, I was in Fiji as a lifeguard on Namotu Island. A few of you guys have actually been there with the Aloha Awards, gratefully. This was one of the red alert swells, and all big wave surfers from around the world came to Cloudbreak to surf this day. And there was one guy out there who took the biggest risk I've ever seen in the ocean. He went surfing before sunup. He didn't watch the conditions. He didn't take the right equipment. He didn't have his buoyancy vest or anything like that. And he actually drowned. He went over the first wave of the day, had 3 waves on the head, and then didn't surface. His board was tombstoning. He had to be rescued, dragged out to the boat. And the next 5.5 minutes, we watched him get resuscitated. Now, this might be hard to hear for some people, but this is the world that we play in, or that I play in particular, but it's life and death. And that, for me, is why we need to respect the ocean, why we need to practice self-care and not be a superhero. For this guy, he survived. Aaron Gold, Hawaiian surfer, he's a big wave surfer professionally and still had this experience. But what was really powerful here for me was that I could see the risk that he put everyone else in because he wasn't looking out for his own well-being. Might I add that that's a ring on his finger that's tattooed on there. He has a wife and a few kids. You know, we need to think about the repercussions of the people around us when it comes to our own well-being and our own survival. You know, this is what he should have worn, but he didn't. So don't be a superhero, know your limits and make sure you stay within them. What we're going to do is we're going to break for questions shortly. So I'd love for you guys to think up what it is you've got on your mind and we can have a really robust conversation. I've brought a couple of slides in here just to really quickly run you through this concept of vulnerability shortly. So we'll focus on that. But one of the messages just before we depart this story is the most profound thing that I saw was professional big wave surfers that had BRAG training, that had done the most amazing state-of-the-art recovery sort of support training. His best friends were smacking him on the legs saying, come on, wake up. Bit more French than that, but literally they were so well trained to bring this guy back from really dark places, and they didn't have the skills in the time because the trauma in the moment made that they froze. So not only like understand the skills and strategies to maintain well-being, but also make sure you practice them and make sure you stay calm because people genuinely in this world are depending on us. We won't focus on that. So if we put our hand up, our GP is often the place for support. A lot of people don't realize that, but I think in this world, we probably do more so than most. This is really the point. Know what those tools are, know what your wellbeing toolkit is, whatever has worked for you or you resonate with on this call even, open your toolkit, chuck it in there, but actually use it when things aren't going to plan. Actually employ those strategies when you know you need to. I would love to just share a quick little story before we go to questions. Now, this is probably 13 years ago that I met a guy named Grant, and we sort of worked together in building this organization for 3.5 years called One Wave. It was all about sharing mental health and making it visible when it's quite an invisible thing. Dressing up in bright clothes to draw attention to the issue. It gathered over the next few years so much attention that we actually had people from all walks of life coming and joining us on the beach. It turned into a 20,000 strong movement around the world. But what we also saw was that vulnerability, as Brené Brown says, it had such power to change things for people. That's me on the beach in front of hundreds of people at Bondi Beach years ago. And what I started to realize is that being vulnerable is not a weakness. Being vulnerable actually brought together this global community, and it was so powerful. So powerful, in fact, that people started to notice. People came and got involved and shared their own stories of struggle. Harry was talking to me one-to-one on the beach around how hard it is after the death of his mother and how he was just expected to get on with it. But as a young kid, that's really impacted his life. You know, these conversations wouldn't happen if it wasn't for standing up and practicing genuine vulnerability. But what I would love to employ here is vulnerability is something that needs to be intentional. I call it intentional vulnerability. So you're not just throwing unsafe things out there. Even the Prime Minister of Australia came down and actually got involved in the work that we were doing because of vulnerability. Now, I won't share that story, but we can later. But basically, I was sitting in a chair years ago on national TV sharing my own experience of loneliness. That was the first time I'd ever shared anything with anyone in a public domain, and it was on national TV. It was daunting as anything. But what that showed me was that over the next couple of weeks, the amount of people that came out of the woodwork and shared their own story inspired so many more people. We don't know how important it is until we practice intentional vulnerability. And I'd love for you guys to take that on in your own way, in your own scenario. So there are many different ways that you can sort of practice that activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, whether that is, you know, tactical breathing that soldiers employ, whether it is any form of mindfulness or meditation that we've spoken about today on the call, or whether it's creating those daily habits and practices that you know that keep you well. I don't care what it is. But my ask of you is figure out a way that you guys can be the lighthouse in your own story so that you don't, in the storm, get swept off into the storm and a part of the challenge. Lighthouses are constant. They're steady. They're still. They have a guiding light inside. And no matter how dark it is, they know that storm will pass. So maybe this is something that can be the perfect timing for you guys when you're in this space of frustration, of resentment, of near burnout that we've seen at the start of this call when you guys are sharing some of those things. Now, we've got a bit of time to dive into conversation, but I'm also really willing to go over the hour. If you guys have to duck off at the end of this hour, that's okay. But this conversation does not need to just be abruptly cut short as soon as the hour hits. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes away, but I'd love to potentially explore more if you guys are open and willing. So I'd love to just understand from you guys. Well, first of all, here's a summary. If you want to take a photo of this screen, this might be helpful. Screenshot, photo, whatever you need to do. But in a moment, I'm going to ask you, what is the one thing that you've taken away from today? What's the one thing that you are going to do or employ in your own lives that actually you think can change? Gary Keller wrote this book, The One Thing, and I love it because it's about creating healthy habits and practices in your life and chipping them away with short, small actions. So use the chat. I want to know from you right now, what is the one thing that you're going to take away from today? While you're writing that, I'm going to answer this question in the chat. So my question for me is, I've been through burnout. It's a real thing. How did you know that you were experiencing burnout? And what were your most prominent symptoms and signs? Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Really, really valuable question. For me, burnout was something which I didn't really understand. I didn't really know much about it, so I didn't know the term at the time. But what I did know was that I wasn't myself. I was irritable, like I said. I was frustrated at things that weren't usually frustrating me. I was feeling like I was completely disconnected from my work in surf therapy to the point where I didn't care about the participants that I was working with. And that was a telltale sign for me that I thought, my God, there is something really wrong here. And I actually went back to a supervisor at the time from previous occupational therapy world, and she helped me unpack that. And it was super valuable to have that mirror, that reflection, that externalization from the internal feelings. So Sarah, for me, that was more around the frustration, anger, and really letting that impact the relationships in my life. And like we heard, a breakdown of a marriage because I didn't manage that well at home. But that's me and my own story. For you, Sarah, whatever that looks like, it doesn't need to look like my sort of examples. It could be many different things that you've seen or heard, or nothing that's even been mentioned today. But whatever it is, you know that, and you know what sort of things have worked in the past. So I'd love for you to sort of hopefully take things away from today, and maybe maybe cut some corners that I wasn't able to cut, and made those mistakes myself. Yeah. Is that so in the chat I'm seeing a couple of things come through. Coming, I'm not seeing too much, so I want to know what's the one thing you're taking away from today. Fran said that her takeaway is to remember to look after your own daily well-being and support participants you work with. Yeah, the value of being vulnerable. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so were there any other questions that came up through this chat, Chris, as we were chatting?
No, everybody was pretty on it. I have a question.
Fire away.
I mean, it's kind of personal, so for everyone who knows me, but Joel, you obviously know me, but it's something that this really inspired me. And essentially it's that in kind of mission driven work or for purpose work, which I've taken that name on because of you. Honestly, passion can sometimes be the very fuel that feeds the burnout. And so as a leader, how do you sort of differentiate between a healthy, sustaining drive and a self-destructive frenzy of purpose? Because I often feel in a self-destructive frenzy of purpose, although I'm so happy to be here. I do feel that. So yeah, I'm kind of curious, like how do you as a leader kind of differentiate between the two? I'm passionate, but I don't want to be that passionate.
Yeah, yeah, that's really, really valuable. And I'm sure a lot of people, there's a few nods going, like I feel what you're saying. And I can only speak to my experience, but knowing you and knowing how passionate you are about this, like it's wonderful that you have that. But a lot of people don't have that passion. And so first thing that I often hear is, it's all well and good that you're passionate, but how can I be? And there's three things that I would say that you ask yourself. What makes you mad? What makes you glad? And what makes you sad? Mad, glad, sad will really activate that passion within you. But when you're feeling like there's this slippery slope or dovetail between the positive and the negative, and it's like tipping over, for me, if I know that I'm really passionate about something, I know that I'm going to pour my life into it, and I know it's going to get pretty bad pretty quickly because I don't have a boundary. So for me, it's around coming back to your boundaries that work for you and your environment, and being able to figure out how to sustain and maintain those boundaries. Boundaries around self-care, boundaries around time management, boundaries around diary management, being able to focus on the portions of work that you get the most out of and are making the most impact, rather than getting swayed by your inbox or pulled in a different direction because you're trying to be a people pleaser. I'm not sure if that's you, Chris, but I'm a people pleaser, and I needed to pretty quickly pull myself into line to not let other people be energy vampires from me. Yeah. I mean, there's big thumbs up there. Nice one. All right. Well, if there's more on it around that, let's keep talking. So Marika talked about this idea of I know I should prioritize myself, my schedule, taking time, walk on the beach, but somehow I don't know how to actually do it. Yes, especially when I took too much projects on. Yes. So this is probably the biggest challenge for us as practitioners in mental health, surf therapy, the wider wellbeing space, is that we know this stuff. Like I said a couple of times today, I don't want to teach you to suck eggs, and this is a conversation around us. And that's because we know it. Like we know the list of things, and that's why I didn't spend much time on them. But there's a difference between knowing it theoretically and practicing it practically. You know, there's a big divide between those. And what you're feeling is that challenge of, cool, I know it, but how do I activate it? I think that people will expect Rome to be built in a day a lot of the time. And they want to move from this to this really quickly. But there's this gray area where we need to be okay to sit in and to work through, but make slow incremental changes. And whatever those incremental changes are, maybe that can be a way to get you into creating those habits. Let's say it takes 21 days to build a habit and 60 something days to cement that habit. So don't expect it to happen overnight, but also know that the small incremental changes you're making will actually amount to a lot over time. Did that really answer your question, Marie? We'll come back to that. So Hannah talked about asking for help and opening up about my burnout is my takeaway. Needing help doesn't make me weak or incapable. Oh, amen to that. Yeah, 100%. So many things that you're taking away, Chris, that every person you meet can literally change your life. Treat them the way yeah, love that. This is so good. So Carolina, remind yourself about the importance of self-care. So I'd love for you guys to throw whatever questions you've got in the chat, because I'm trying to read through this quickly. I'm terrible at doing two things at once, as you can see. But whatever questions you've got, copy and paste it back down to the bottom, or take yourself off mute and please bring that up. You know, we've got time for a valuable conversation now if you guys can stick around. But I am also mindful that there's a lot of information that we've shared today. So what might be coming up for you? Who's got a question that they might want to dive into right now? Take yourself off mute and let's go. This is so cool because when I have a chance to stop for a minute and take a beat, I get to go through the list of faces here and see just how many people from all different corners of the world are on this call. It is a pleasure to see you all. So whether it is you've got questions now, whether you've got them later, I'd really be happy to keep this conversation going. There's my email, there's my dates. You can get in touch with me and ping with me what your thoughts were around this session, but also any questions that you thought, oh, I wish I asked that and I didn't have the ability to do so. Like I said, if you're on this call now live, or if you're watching it back, feel free to still reach out to me and ask those questions, because this doesn't have to be the end of the discussion.
I think
I have
also,
a question.
go talk. Also, Fran, talk. And then Joel, I want you to read Valentina's too. Go ahead, Fran.
Thank you. I was just wondering, you know, you were saying about intentional vulnerability. Just wondering if you could unpack that a wee bit and explain it for us.
Yeah, absolutely, Fran. What I've come to realize, Fran, is that in the sector, there are a lot of people that are sharing passionately about their own lived experience, their own journey through, whether it be mental health challenges or burnout or anything else. But there are some pretty quick and easy ways to trigger people if we don't think about the repercussions of sharing with said vulnerability. So intentional vulnerability for me is understanding, first of all, what you are happy to share and where your boundary stops. For me, I have a boundary which is a lot more over familiar and colloquial, where I'm happy for people to know about my own personal life. As a therapist, we were told not to ever share anything personal because it needs to be about the patient. I think that's bullshit. So being able to help them realize that they're normal and human by sharing some lived experience can be valuable. But knowing that it's not about you, that you can't share things that are going to trigger that individual, that you need to be understanding the implications of you sharing that on someone else and doing it in a safe and supported way. So intentional vulnerability, we could probably spend another 2 hours, Fran, on this conversation, but I've framed that sort of terminology because I was so sick to death of seeing someone that was meaning well and let's say a keynote presentation around lived experience of mental health challenges. Keynote is a bit of a stretch, but they would go on stage, they would share the most sort of raw stories and examples and crack open the audience and leave people in pieces after that presentation. You know, that's not smart, that's not safe, that's not ethical as practitioners. So we need to know what impact that is having on other people. Yeah. All right, so we'll come back to
Yeah, so just being
question.
aware of what what you're,
Go
so
on, Fran.
being really purposefully aware of what it is that you're sharing and having a plan of what you might share in a really safe way. So
Exactly.
it's
Yep.
just
And
giving a little bit to help people to open up, but not to re-traumatize anyone. It's
Yep.
yeah, that would take a good bit of consideration, wouldn't it? But definitely worth doing. I'll have a
yeah,
good think about that. Thank you.
exactly. Exactly. And at the start of this call, I actually wasn't going to share with you guys around my own lived experience as a 13-year-old kid. But it's important to me that I'm real and I'm like leaning into the sort of conditioning that's led me to here. But also I did that in a way where I know exactly how I want to say it and what I want to share with you. I'm not going to tell you, and we're all practitioners in different senses, and I'm going to take it to a place of extremes for a moment to demonstrate what we're talking about here. Now, if for anyone, if this is triggering, I apologize, but maybe tune out for the next 30 seconds while I share this. If I was going to inappropriately share without boundaries and what's the opposite to intentional, unintentional, I would actually share something along the lines of this. When I was a 13-year-old kid, I actually was so badly bullied that my parents lived in Caves Beach on the cliffs, and I would actually think about different ways to go and end my life. You know, no young kid should have to think about that, but I was so broken that I literally was just trying to get creative on different ways to just escape it all. That, Fran, is so unsafe and so triggering if it's done in a vulnerable community of people that aren't practitioners like this, for example. You know, I know how I talk about this story in different ways when I do different presentations and different conversations, and I'm comfortable with that. But I also know where the buck stops and what I don't want people to know. I don't want them to know my address. I don't want to know where I live and certain personal details where they can track me down. But there's just a couple of examples there around like how to make sure that you're intentional about what you share. Yeah, that was a really valuable question. Thanks for that. Valentina, no, I'm going to read this for a moment, so sit with me. I'm really tired right now. I realize that I'm doing administrative work, especially government paperwork. It's very stressful for me, and bureaucracy really gets on my nerves. A concrete action I can take is to start delegating some of these tasks. I also want to create small spaces for well-being, but frequently. Yeah, love the lighthouse analogy. Can I get you guys to use the reaction emoticon button on the screen right now? I'd like for you, Valentina, to see the vibes that people are giving you, whether it's they feel you, they're in the space of, oh my God, me too right now. Like that is hitting home for a lot of people because the eyes open, the head nods across the faces on our screen are really demonstrating that. So first things first, Valentina, we hear you, we're with you. But that idea of being a practitioner and doing the work, but also having to run an organization and all of the bureaucracy and bullshit that comes with that, that's bloody hard. So yeah, there's a lot of love coming your way. So the first thing that I think is really important in this example is validation. Like you are not alone in dealing with that. The amount of stuff that we have to deal with that we don't love, that is stuff that is completely away from where we really want to be focusing energy is huge. But the delegation point that you bring up, so incredibly valuable, but so hard to do if we're not aware of what delegation looks like.
Yeah,
Go
it's
ahead.
super hard to do because if you are failing one paperwork, you are done. So it's really difficult. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So burnout can be the best and worst thing that ever happens to us because we can do it once and then learn from it and then sort of rectify those situations, hopefully. Jamie's laughing because he's sitting there cackling himself because he's been there. He's been to those dark places. We've talked about this before. But the why I say it can be the best is you can learn how delegation looks for you. You can learn what it's like to actually take something off your plate or even not be able to handle it and have to just throw everything in the air. And you then start to realize what is super important, what's not important at all, and what's just wasting your time. And whether it is doing a task audit or understanding the sort of every single thing that you've got on your plate and establishing where it sits in the four quadrants, we can run through that later if it's helpful. Or whether it is working out what resources you have around you to externalize some of that pressure that you're feeling. Whether that's therapeutic outlets, whether that's practical support outlets, it doesn't matter. But from a delegation point of view, with limited resources within a serve therapy context, this can be one of the hardest things. One of the learnings I had a few years ago was to use students and interns to support what we're doing. Now, that might be very different in different scenarios or contexts, but psychology and occupational therapy in particular, students that are going through university, we partner with those unis to then come and provide 12-week placements to dive into literally everything. They're learning this world, so they're happy to do it for free. But that is support that you can get to really bolster up what you're doing. Whether it's volunteer systems through corporate pathways, whether that is in structured support through interns or that, there's different ways to get support if we can't afford it. But what we do know is that we need to focus on that concept of delegation rather than, and here's the clinger, I'm sure a lot of you have done this, I did. It's so much work to have to educate someone else and spend the time away from actually doing the task, so I'm just going to do the bloody task, right? So that is dangerous thinking. That mentality is going to keep us in a fixed mindset and not a growth mindset, but it's also going to prevent us from actually growing the organization or the impact of what we're creating. As founders, now I'm looking at you, Valentina, because I'm really feeling you right now. As founders, we can often be the biggest problem within our organization. And this is going to hit hard for some of you guys. It's called founder syndrome. And I know a lot about it because I was the bottleneck within Waves of Wellness for a long time. My thinking was limited. My education was only what I have under my own brain. And I was preventing the growth of the organization because I didn't allow people in to support doing the lifting. Now, in this example, Valentina, what I realized is that I needed to step aside and check myself before I wreck myself. But that actually cascaded out to more than just me. I needed to check myself before I wrecked the potential impact that we could create as an organization. So as I was able to do that and just take a beat, I had perspective. So that allowed me to have a bit more support around me and an understanding of awareness. But what I'm getting at here for you, and I'll wrap this up because I could talk forever on this, is figure out where you can get that support, where you can delegate, where you can step back and get clarity and support, and then you might be able to move forward in a bit more of a structured manner. Happy to talk more about that. Mark, go ahead with your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I mean, the whole purpose of the Aloha Award, as most of you know, is to support all of you. And, like Joel, I have tons of these conversations all of the time. And I think my number one bit of advice to all of you is to do less. It's that simple. The second one of you has some spare time and some spare energy, you immediately deploy that time and energy in the service of others. And so instead of operating at 75% of capacity, you operate at 110% of capacity. And to use an analogy that I'll use at ISTO, if any of you have driven a car, and I'm sure you have, there's a red line on your RPMs. And what happens is that all of you are consistently above that red line. And any auto mechanic will tell you that when you operate your car consistently above the red line, the engine burns out. And so the answer is to not operate at 100% or 98% of capacity, but to mindfully operate at 75% of capacity, because shit comes up. Shit comes up in your personal life. One of your parents gets sick. Some financial crisis happens with your cousin. One of your program participants, loses a parent. I mean, who knows? And then all of a sudden, you find yourself at 110% of capacity. So I think the most effective tool when it comes to preventing burnout is just to move from 100% of capacity to mindfully be at 75% of capacity. And what you'll discover is that because of that unexpected shit, you'll end up at 90 or 95% of capacity anyway. Instead of targeting 95% and living in the red zone at 120. And that's the hardest thing, in my experience, talking to all of you, that's the hardest thing for all of you to do. You have a little bit of free time and you immediately feel guilty that you're not doing something quote unquote productive with it.
Oh my God, preach. Can we just bottle you up and just like spray you across the universe? That is so valuable. Look, what you've actually just raised there, the G word, the guilt word, Mark, is so key, and it really segues perfectly into Hannah's question. So last thing I'll say about that, Mark, is thank you for sharing that wisdom. Thank you for that perspective and lens. I think that is incredibly valuable, and whatever you're taking away from what Mark just shared, maybe share that with people around you as well, because more people need to know that. So Hannah asked about this idea that how do we deal with that feeling of guilt in saying no or doing less than maybe you could have. So she's literally spoken directly to what you've just talked about. So Hannah, is there anything else you wanted to provide in terms of context before I then respond to that? Oh my God, I love this conversation. How good.
Not particularly. I think just I expect a lot of myself, even though I know I need to take a step back sometimes. So how do you, I don't know, if you have any advice on being a little easier on yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to be super direct because I don't really operate that any other way. I'm looking at your face on the screen here, but I'm going to look at you here dead on when I say this. It's gonna be one sentence. It's gonna be hard to hear. Give yourself a fucking break. That's my message to you. So we are our worst nightmare by putting the most unrealistic pressure on ourselves. You know, that pressure comes from many places. It comes from the patterns and behaviors and the conditioning as a young child. And there's a lot of work in that around psychotherapy and practices. But when we're thinking about why we feel guilty, it could be because you want to people please. It could be because you want to support as many people as possible, and you're not realistic about the amount of resources that one single human individual has. You know, whatever that is, Hannah, for you, your own example, only you can answer that question. But I have learned the hard way that I need to give myself a break. I've learned the hard way what happens when you don't. And when you do, like Mark was just discussing, RPM redline for so long that you literally crumble into not a million, probably about 100 pieces that you have to put back together. So there's a lot of work in unpacking what that guilt is for you, and I'm not going to make up your story for you, but understanding who you are and how you show up and doing the work. And that work could be internal sort of self-work, it could be reflective practice, it could be supported meditation with a practitioner, it could be doing therapy. And I'll say, Hannah, for me, 4 years of doing psychotherapy as the patient was the most beneficial thing I ever did. I was so caught up in my own head for years that, you know, I'm the therapist and I'm not going to get therapy, that was just not serving me whatsoever. So if my story is a good example for you, that guilt was understood pretty quickly as I was never enough. I was never validated properly as a child, and I always was seeking external validation from other people rather than being able to genuinely find it from within myself. And so that's just one example, but maybe that's, you know, ringing true in some of your experience. Mark, go ahead. You're about to dive in there.
Yeah, Hannah, I was gonna maybe try and answer your question with a shift in mindset, because I get this a lot from our Aloha Award recipients. I remember, and I'm sure Ben won't mind me sharing this, but Ben feeling guilty for being on Nemotu, you know, like just feeling guilty for receiving that gift. And that's such a common sentiment that I see amongst all of you. And the example that I always give, or the mindset shift that I try and provide, is if your goal is to give as much as possible over the course of your lifetime, and by saying yes to everybody, you're dramatically increasing your risk of burnout. And by burning out, you're going to stop giving. In a way, it's actually selfish of you to say yes, because you're cutting short your ability to give sustainably over your life. So you need to shift your mindset away from, I feel guilty about saying no, to, if my goal is to give as much as possible for as long as possible in a sustainable way over my life, what is the right amount of yeses and what is the right amount of nos?
Oh, there's rockets coming at you hot for that one. So that concept of personal sustainability we mentioned at the start, but Mark has just nailed that, Hannah. So if you're on this premise of I need to give, who's giving to you? Like, you need to put the mirror up and give to yourself so that you are actually a better version of that person to support and give. And personal sustainability means longevity and long-term sustained high performance. That comes from mental fitness, understanding yourself and doing the work to be able to be as fit as possible and not just focus on the physical and not the mental. So there's a lot in that, and I would love to spend 3 hours talking about that. But thank you once again for your question, but also for the really valuable insights from the group.
Can I just add to that really quick? I was thinking about this, Hannah, because we're so busy doing the work to fix ourselves that while we're doing the work to fix ourselves, we're not necessarily and always loving ourselves. And I think it's just missing the point about a course that I had just taken in conversations with Mark. But our nervous system, right, which balances us wholly and completely, it doesn't need to be controlled. It just needs to feel safe. And I think that 75% of max capacity, knowing full well, to Mark's point, your neighbor has an issue, you know, your friend is in trouble, somebody's in the hospital, all of these issues are going to come up. You're going to get to 110 probably. But I think it's just that, like, remembering to love ourselves and in sort of trying to regulate our nervous system through box breathing, which is one of my favorites, Joel. It's also like, oh yeah, I need my nervous system to feel safe in order to even be productive. So yeah, I really love this conversation. And Ben, to your point, yes, we'll keep the conversation going over Huva. And also just really quick, because Joel doesn't know this, but we've got some speakers out here, Fran and Valentina. We're so excited for you to speak at the conference this year. And some of the stuff Valentina was referring to are some of the issues not all of us are having to deal with this year, which is trying to get out of South America and travel on visas and travel. I mean, just traveling in general. And so Valentina, I know I'm writing letters to help you get out and get to Scotland, and I think we're good, but it is happening in other parts of the world, and it's part of that paperwork frustration, and I feel you. So anyway.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to share, I know that Chris will be happy for me to share some of the personal conversations that we have, but to share a few examples. Chris and I are talking about a task or something that's right in front of us, and then it's really often important for us to go, hang on a second, what's the why behind this? The why might be, why am I feeling guilty when I shouldn't be? I deserve this rest and I need to look after myself to be able to serve. Why is it that I'm feeling I have to please this person by dropping everything and just putting all of my energy into that or them? You know, the why is something really important to come back to. And when I asked that question to Chris, a number of times over the last few months when we've had a chance to catch up, it's ended in tears. It's ended in like the most amazing joy. It's ended in some really special conversations where we dived a lot deeper into the nuances around that issue rather than the issue itself.
Hey, Joel, I just wanted to jump in and say I love this question of why. And in fact, to give you a little preview of this fireside chat, we're going to have the first question that I'm going to ask everybody in the room is why you give. I mean, really, really deeply, like dig deep. Why do you give? Because I think when you can answer that question, you can solve 99% of the problems that arise as a consequence of giving. So I wanted to just plant that seed with all of you and encourage you to come. We'll have another discussion. This is great because a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is super complementary to what Joel has talked about, and a lot of the stuff he's talked about is complementary to what I'll talk about. But let me just plant that seed so you can start thinking about that question. You'll have an advantage relative to everybody else that's turning up cold and gets asked the question live.
Love that. Well, Mark's a good salesman, right? You could sell ice to an Eskimo. And I'd love to just drop a little bit more into the ocean before you then leave that with us. What's your why? If you're asking about why you give, can you give us a good example around what it really means to you?
Well, that's what I'm going to talk about at the fireside chat. You'll have to come to find out.
You got to be there. You got to be there. Hannah, I'm trying to get Alex to get you there. There's no reason that ISA is not at ISTO this year. But yeah, I love that, Mark.
Totally. All right. Well, I would love to have an understanding from you guys as to what resonated, what landed, how this session went. It's really important for me to know which was more beneficial and which was not. If you feel up for giving some for feedback via email or what have you, I'd love to hear from you. For the fact that you've all stuck around for a lot longer than was first agreed upon, I really appreciate it. I'm a big believer that we don't just finish things when we have to, we finish them when they're actually wrapping up. And if you guys don't have any other questions on your mind, feel free to put your hand up, raise that emoticon reaction now if you want to still talk about anything that's burning. But what I would love to do is to continue this conversation, yes, via the Hoover app, yes, via Mark's session at the conference. If you're not with us and you're not able to make it to that conference, then we'll find a way to be able to include you in these conversations. But this stuff is the essence of what we do. This stuff is the essence of being able to provide that long-term support and that long-term impact. Now, whether you are in one of those 140 organizations across the ISTO family worldwide on 6 continents, or whether you're new and starting out, it doesn't matter. These are all practices and principles that you need to employ to make sure that you can keep showing up for not only the people we serve, but for yourself. So if you don't think you're worthy of that right now, then my question to you is simple. Why? Do the work, unpack it, understand it, and dive in further into understanding ourselves so that we can be better at serving other people around us. Appreciate you all. Big love to you all. And very much love this conversation.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks so much, Joel. You're amazing. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Joel.
Take care, everyone.
See you
Big love.
soon.
Aloha.
Got Oh,
goodness.
Fran, I love it. This felt like a mini therapy session. We love you, Fran. So excited for your session. That's
Oh,
awesome.
thank you all. Thank you all. It was lovely. It was beautiful timing as well, because coming to the end of the season, proper burnout coming on us all. So
And
it's a
then,
nice
and then we're going to
reminder.
make you stand up on a podium and tell us everything. So you're not done yet with your tasks to do.
Oh God,
So
that's next month's issue.
we're
This is
so
okay.
excited. Oh, that's right. It's not October yet. Okay.
Not till tomorrow, I think.
It's technically 25 days away. I'm not saying anything, not trying to scare you, but it's 25, 24 days away. Anyway, thanks everybody for being here. Joel, that was amazing. You're incredible.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Big love to you all.
Bye, everyone.
Look forward
Thank
to chatting.
you. Bye.